Alright, so what we are going to do next is, now since we have already created couple of users in database, if I go back in database, if I scroll it down a little bit, yeah, we have database SQLite here, and we also have one table user roles which is currently empty since there's no role linked with any users. And here in users we have a lot of, I mean, users, but we probably don't have uh, anyone linked with any roles. So we'll have to do something there. While creating user, we can pass a role as well, or why as well as while updating user, we can also pass some role, assign some role. So in these two cases, we'll have to add role, we'll have to link role as well with the user creation or updation. So what I'm going to do next, if I show you a user entity here, as you notice, we have many to many relationship with the role, and in role, the property which denotes this entity is users. So if I go back in roles, if I open, and vice versa has been done here, like this type is user and this roles property in user referring to this entity. So these two are binded up. And now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to set roles while creating and updating. So since we have already too many users, let's first start with update. So here in update, so we are right now finding existing users. If existing user doesn't exist, and then we are throwing some error. So now what we can do next is here in update user DTO, we'll have to update create user DTO, since update user DTO is actually extending from create user DTO, and what I want from user is to pass roles in this way. Let's say admin, just name, client, this way. And while implementing this application on UI, maybe let's say React, or we can say Angular, or whatever front end we are using, we can have an enum there, and we can just pass those names which role exist in our system. Okay, so what we can do, we can just use string and we can keep it empty, I mean a list string array. What we are going to do here, we are going to make this optional. So we'll be using this class validator, I mean validation annotations. And why I'm trying to make it optional, the reason behind that is in case we don't want to pass any value here, it will be by default. Let's keep it role dot admin. Yeah, it's not admin, it will be a member. Okay, or by default let's give it a list role, it will be a client. Okay, and now it should be an array, right? It should be an array, is array. So here we can say and then we can check if we have any enum validation here. Is enum, yeah, we have this one. So it will except one entity. I mean the first parameter is enum itself, role, and the second one is message. It will be one message. Okay, here in message we can write each role must be a valid role from role enum. Alright, and now there's one property each here that I can make it true, so that it will verify, it will check each property, each role passed in this roles, and we can mark it optional. I think that's fine for in validation point of view. And next what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna okay, so now we are getting this error, so I'll fix it in some time. So before that, what I want, so we have this update user detail, and here what I'm gonna do, in update user detail, I'm going to fetch roles, all the roles, all the assigned roles, right? So how we can do that? So to do that, I have two approach. Either I can use custom query or I can use role service. So if I use role service, then I will have to inject roles module in user. Okay, so let's do it. I mean, we can just use role service here. Okay, and now since we are trying to use role service, it will only be available from roles dependency container to user dependency container if we import role module in user module. So let's add it this way. All right, now let's go back in user service, and what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to find all the roles here. So let's do this here after all the things are done. So assigned roles, or we can just say roles equal to await this dot role service dot get roles, and can we use this way? I mean, can we pass? Okay, so we will need to create one method here to get role by ID. Let's do it right away. Async delete role get role by ID, and here, so now since we are not using ID, instead we are using names, so we'll have to add a custom method here. So we'll have to say get role by names, and in this case what I can say, role names, and this will be a string array. And now what I'm gonna do, I'm going to find all the roles, find or fill, find one, but we don't need to find one, instead we want to find all of them. Let's use find only. Here in where condition, what we can add, I think we can use, since we need to find with the multiple options. I mean, roles can be an array. So how we'll be adding condition here? Usually, like for one property, we can add ID with some ID, but here we need to find it for multiple roles. I think we can do this way: in and role names. Let's import in. All right, now we can just return this, and then we can use this method here, get role by names, and this we are only going to do if updated user DTO has roles. So let's say if we are not passing any roles, so in that case what will happen by default, we will have a role. If I go in create user DTO, we will have role equal to client, so that will be a problem. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna remove this value from here as a default value, since since I'm also inheriting create user DTO for, I mean, using update user DTO from create user DTO. So in case, let's say if by default, I mean, user is not passing anything in rules, then in that case we'll have this default value. Wait, yeah, I mean, just client inside an array. Okay, so instead of setting this value from here, like it can override if we I mean existing data, right? So what we can do, instead of setting this value here, what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna go back in the code and I'm going to set it at the time of create. I can set the default value, but right now what I'm gonna do, okay, so I'm gonna get all the roles. I'm gonna check if the role exists on update user DTO, and then I can execute this query. And if when I will have all the roles available, and then I can name it something like assigned roles or something like that, and then what we can do next is, okay, so what we can do next is we can just update our existing user. So object dot assign, and in this case it first parameter will be existing user, and second would be roles and assigned roles. Okay, now otherwise, I mean, if roles doesn't exist on update user DTO, it will keep as it is. Okay, so if it was empty initially, that is fine, it will be an empty array, or it will just be an undefined. But if it exists there, it is going to update the property, I mean complete array. How we are going to do it in create? So in create, what we have right now is we'll have to first see why this error is happening. So if I try to notice, string is not assignable to d parcel role. Okay, fine. So in case if we are trying to get roles, and since in create user DTO we have roles as string, right? but in create it is expecting that it should be of type role. Since create is a type ORM property, so it is using entity as a type user, and it has roles as role property. So how we are going to fix it? To fix this, let's do one thing. First, try to find role object. Okay, so let's say const, and this time what I'm gonna do is assign roles and await this dot roles service dot find get role by names, or I can also make it plural, get roles by names. Let me just change the method name here, get roles by names. I'll just quickly update it here as well. You can keep the names as you want, but here I'm just trying to follow some pattern. And next, what I can do in get roles by name, I can pass role names that would be in a string. So I must be getting it inside create user detail and roles. Okay, if this is not there, what else we can do? If this is not defined, then we can just set client. Alright, and now we'll have assigned roles, and then what we can do, we can just we can add one more property here, roles, and this will be assigned roles, and this will fix our error. Now I'm just overwriting the roles property with the assigned roles that I have fetched it from the database. And now let's say if this doesn't exist, if there's no roles for the given whatever the past roles, we are passing some role, let's say admin 2, admin 3, any other names which doesn't exist in the roles database. In that case, what will happen at the time of create user DTO, it will validate it first and then it will throw error. So it will not pass the request to the user service. So when it reaches here, we are 100% sure that roles actually exist in our database. So this will have actual roles array, and if in case if there's no roles, then we are trying to fetch a role for client, and then we are trying to set it in the roles. Okay, now we are getting some error here, so we need to fix this. Okay, so it is saying cannot resolve dependency, role is expired. Okay, that might be happening because we haven't saved it. Let me check it. This file is already saved. Then why this is happening? Alright, if I go back in role module, here I also need to export the role service, otherwise I will not be able to use it in other modules. So when we write add any service or provider in export, then we tell NestJS that this role module has a dependency container with an instance of role service. I want to make it available to the any other service who imports this role module. So this role service instance will be kind of public, and whoever importing this role module will be able to use the role service in that module as well. Alright, now as you see, we don't have any error. Let's try to test one by one, and see if that works. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna update user. Since if I open users unauthorized, okay, all right, let me do one thing. I don't want to use authorization in login as of now. We can definitely do that, but let's keep it commented for now. All right, so we have all these users. So for, let's say for example, member 1 @gmail.com. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna update this user. So what was the ID of that user? 2. So to update the user to, I need to pass roles, and here I want to make it member. That's why I used names like member@gmail.com. So generally all the email with the member should have a member role, just to not remember all the email IDs. So I'm keeping it simple. In case I will create some client, I will name it client@gmail.com or something like that. Alright, so if I try to save it, will it work? Let's see. Yeah. So now we have this in response, means the role is added in our database. So the first thing we would like to verify here, if I go back in database, we'll have to let me refresh it as well. So as you see, we have one entry in user roles, right? And if I expand it a bit more, why I'm not able to expand it? I think here I can expand. Okay, for user ID 2, we have a role ID, I mean 4. Let's say if I want to add multiple roles here, let's say client, and save it again, then you will see we will have one more entry for user ID 2. There's in role ID 7. So if I go back in roles, I can see the 7 is client and 4 is whatever, and 4 is member, right? So it is correct. We are also getting this in the response, I mean the roles in the response, although we don't need created at and updated at in case in roles. So what we can do, we can just go here in that's fine for now in the update. But if I try to face the users, I don't think we are going to get the roles here. So we are not getting any role details here for this user, right? So how we can get that details? To get it, what we need to do here, we need to tell type ORM we also want to fetch associated entities. So let me scroll it a bit up, and here in the find users, what we need to do, we need to pass some options. And what will be that options? So here we need to tell the type ORM that we want to also fetch roles. If we will have multiple associated entities, then we will pass multiple property names. Currently we have just one, and in that case we can get the roles. And if I try to execute, I mean the endpoint again, what I'm gonna get, I'm gonna get the same details which I was getting in update. Yeah, but I don't need this created and updated. That doesn't make any sense. We can keep ID in case we want to differentiate two roles. Then we can keep ID, but I don't need created and updated. So there's a property called select. In select, what we can pass in, we can pass the entity name and We can pass ID, and for ID let's make it true, and for name let's make it true. Okay, and if you are 100% sure that ID name will be Unix, so we can also remove ID as well. So we are just interested in seeing the name of the roles, and if I try to execute it again, we'll just get names. Cool. Now next, what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna verify the create user as well. So, this is a kind of project management tool, and we are not creating any user. The user will all automatically be created at the time of registration, and at that time we should not provide any roles to that user, or we can just say we can provide one role, that is client. And so at the time of register, by default we can provide a client role. Let's say we want to use, or we can just use Jack 123. Now if I try to create this user, so the role for this user is client. Okay, if I try to go in get all user roles, I mean get all users, then what we are going to see, we'll have one more user that is named Jack123 with roles. This. Okay, so one more thing I would like to do, since this create user is only happening from registration, I don't need to take it at the time of creating this from the roles. Alright, but let's say if some but I will let it have, I mean we'll keep it here. The reason behind that, in case in future if we'll have some functionality from client side, or some I mean whichever framework or any UI we are using, and we want to pass some roles at the time of creation, we can pass it as well. But by default, if UI doesn't allow roles, since UI will not have any property field for passing roles, then by default it will create client. Okay, so that was it from this video.